Hi, I'm Jane and this is Steve, and I'm here to tell you my story. You might know me not just as Jane, but as Tom's mum, or Barney's mum, or even Graham's wife, Dave's sister, and to Josh and Ben, I'm known as Auntie Jane. So please excuse me for using notes, but there's quite a few years to get through in my life story. So I was born in Finsbury Park, and we soon moved to South Lambeth, and my dad decided to train to become a minister in the Church of England. So he did the Southwark ordination course, and that was while I was at infant school. And I remember him studying at his desk in the corner of our sitting room in the evenings, learning all his theology and stuff. So once he had been ordained as a minister, we moved to Croydon to a church called Christ Church West Croydon, and he was the curate there. So my junior school life was spent in Croydon in Surrey. And then when I was in year 6, he moved again to be a curate in Seven Kings in Ilford, so we moved once more. And then when we'd only lived there for about 2 years, he became the vicar of the same church, and so we just moved a few yards away to Barking in Essex, and he was then the vicar of St Erkenwald's Church in Barking. So I was brought up in the Anglican Church, and I really loved it. I enjoyed singing in the choir, and I had piano lessons with the organist, who was a lovely lady called Gwen, and she was a great role model to me in my teenage years. She was a lovely Christian lady. And our church had links with many charismatic churches, and so I knew about the gifts of the Spirit, and I knew about the charismatic movement, and we had lots of friends in house churches. When I was in the 6th form, I decided that I wanted to receive the gift of tongues, and I started to pray for that on my own in my prayer times, but it just didn't happen, and I was quite frustrated about that. So after a while, I stopped asking for that gift. And then when I went to university in Exeter in Devon, it actually happened one night when I was just praying on my own in my room, and I was really excited. I felt like I couldn't stop speaking in tongues in case I wouldn't be able to speak it again when I stopped. So that was exciting times. So I studied music at Exeter, and I had a fantastic time there because my passions were early music and God, and I could indulge both of those passions to the full. There was a really good Christian union there, and we had loads of great speakers coming to visit, and Roger Forster came and did a mission, and everybody took part and tried to introduce our friends to Jesus. So after university, I came back home to my parents in Barking and started to think about what I wanted to do for a career. So I actually applied to work as a care assistant in Barking Hospital Mental Handicap Unit because I was thinking I might want to become a music therapist. But this job didn't come up straight away, so while I was waiting for that job to come up, I worked in McDonald's in Barking. So I'm sure Josh would be very pleased to know that Auntie Jane worked in McDonald's once. In the evenings in Barking, I did voluntary work at the Gateway Christian Coffee Bar, and this was a joint Barking Churches project that was set up for the young people of Barking, and it was designed as an evangelistic project to bring people into the churches, which it did do. And at the Gateway Coffee Bar I met Graham. He was a friend of my brother David's, and we started going out, and the rest is history. After I had been living in Barking for a year, an opportunity came up to work at a Christian school in Finsbury Park at the Rainbow Church. And my brother David had been working at the church for a while in their audiovisual department, and my future sister-in-law Sue was a senior teacher at the school. So I got a job there and worked there for a year. And that was a really exciting time. And that's also the year that I got married. So after working at the Christian school for a year, I applied to Goldsmiths College in London to do my PGCE teacher training to become a primary school teacher. And having married Graham, I started my studies, and 1 year later our son Barney arrived, and so I took a break from my teacher training and I went back to finish it exactly 1 year later. And as I said, at this time we were attending the Rainbow Church in Finsbury Park, which met in the Rainbow Theatre, that iconic building. Sue and Dave both worked for the church, and it was a really creative and exciting church to be part of. I was involved in the worship team, played the flute, and I helped in the Sunday school, so nothing much has changed there. During the mid-90s there was a move of the Spirit that started off in Canada and moved over to England, called the Toronto Blessing. And I remember not being all that sure about what this was all about and whether it was really of God. And we had at our church a conference, and we had the speaker Martin Scott as the main speaker that weekend. And I remember saying to God, Lord, if this is really you, please show it to me. And I always had a thing about when people prayed for you, that if they were putting their hand on your head, I felt they were pushing you over, and it wasn't really the Holy Spirit. So I said to the Lord, please, Lord, can you just make sure I'll fall over without him having to touch me? So we had a prayer session, and as Martin came along the line, as he approached me, he put his hand up like that, and I immediately fell over under the power of the Holy Spirit. And I was like, yes, it's real. And the funny thing was that Graham was next to me, and then as Martin prayed for him, he fell over, and then he just couldn't get up again because his limbs had lost all power. So we were both really bowled over by that. So during that weekend, I felt the Holy Spirit kind of moving me physically for the first time ever, and it was really exciting. And I kind of had this feeling like I was standing in the sea, and the waves were coming in and out, and it was kind of pushing me. And I still get that feeling now up to this present day, sometimes when I'm praying or when I'm in church, and it's such a blessing because it just, to me, it's the hallmark of the Holy Spirit's presence, which I find really wonderful. Our church grew, and it split into several area churches, and this church was called Unity North London, and we met in school halls in, first of all, Wood Green and then Muswell Hill. And Sue and David took over the leadership of that church in 2002. The church was full of young families, and what happened as the families grew, they realised that they couldn't afford to stay living in London because of the expensive rents and house prices. And so little by little, each family moved out to areas outside London. And the church got smaller and smaller, and we kind of ended up describing ourselves as a remnant. And I think actually by the end there was only me and Graham, Sue and Dave and the boys, and Pauline and Mark Yellen Brown and their boys. And so we had come down to a really, really small number. And around this time, David and Sue started talking to Terry from Croyland Church, and he was telling them that the church at Croyland had also shrunk a lot, and that they were willing to share their building with us and for us to kind of join with them to worship. So we did. We moved into Croyland Road Evangelical Church, and for about a year we met with the congregation there. But most of them were older people who wanted to move away and retire. And so after a year, they gave the church to us. And we've been there ever since. Before we moved into the church in Croyland Road, David had become very ill. And it took a long time for the doctors to find out that he was suffering from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And it was a very tough time for us, a very difficult time. And we were constantly praying for him to be healed. In 2006, the doctors wanted him to have a stem cell transplant. And they said to him that either one of his two brothers or his sister would be the best candidates to give the stem cell transplant. So when I heard this, I was like, come on, Lord, I want it to be me. And they did say to me it will probably be the boys because obviously he's a boy and they might be a closer match with him. So we all gave blood samples and it turned out that I was the best match with David. So I was really thrilled that I was able to give him some stem cells and that helped towards his healing and eventual cure. So that's one of my best things that I've done is give some stem cells to help my brother to recover. In 2009, I left teaching and I became a manager of a children's centre in Enfield. And I really enjoyed that work at first because it was very much caring for families. It was quite pastoral work, and yet I was getting paid for it by the council, so that was great. But as time went on and the government withdrew their funding, I had to take over 2 other children's centres, so I was managing 3 centres, and it was very stressful, and there was a lot of pressure from Ofsted to achieve targets and things. So I stopped doing that in 2015, and I took a sabbatical. And then after a few months, Graham asked me if I would like to work with him. And he is self-employed and he runs a charity which works to benefit the young people of Haringey. Also in 2014, I did my training as a street pastor, and I graduated in November 2014. And I was really happy to do this because my mum was a street pastor for about 10 years before she had to give it up. And I felt like I took the baton from her and I was able to carry on the work that she had started. And she was thrilled. She came to my graduation and she was so happy to see Les Isaac, the founder of Street Pastors, and he recognised her from when she did her training. And it was a really joyful reunion. So Street Pastors is a big part of my life. So more recently, I went to a rally last year in London about knife crime and the effect that it has on the lives of young people. And I'd been praying about wanting to get more involved with helping young people in today's very difficult environment. And I was praying about what direction to go in when John Rawding, who is leader of Enfield Street Pastors, asked me if I'd be interested in relaunching school pastors in Enfield. And I realised almost straight away that this was the answer to my prayer, that it could be a way that I could minister to young people and for the church to show God's love to our local community. So I spent the last few months going around to different churches in Enfield and managed to recruit a team of 6. And we have just started our training back in March. We've done the first 2 sessions, and then unfortunately it's been interrupted due to the corona crisis. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that whenever the time is right. It's a bit frustrating, but then, lots of things are frustrating at the moment, and we just have to wait and be patient. So during the lockdown, I've been able to get more involved with the intercessors team at New River, and I'm really enjoying that, taking part in the Friday night prayer vigils. And I'm also always looking out for opportunities for the church to get more involved in our local community, to show the love of God to our community. Really loving house group with John and Emily and our fantastic house group. I really look forward to Tuesday evenings. And Graham and I love to support Sue and Dave and the team in leading New River Church. It's something that we've done for many years, and we hope to go on to do it for many years to come.